The new Marvel Rivals patch has completely shaken up the meta, adding new variables that have been hard to consistently climb. So whether you're going on win-loss streaks or you're getting dominated by Ironfist, this video is perfect for you, where we break down 10 tips to dominate in the new patch, how to counter certain characters, the best compositions, how to stop getting rolled, and so much more. But I definitely recommend checking out the Marvel Rivals Academy. Over 3 consistent classes from top-tier coaches, including a new signed former pro Overwatch League coach and player. We also have coach scrims, where you get to participate in an organized environment and get coaching after every single round. And we have a really thriving community of players that want to get better. There's also a month free trial, so if you want to try it out at no risk, check it out in the links down below, and I can't wait to see you there. Now, the first thing that we're going to talk about is how to shut down some of the really strong DPS in this patch. First off, Bucky, a character that is extremely good at punishing enemy tanks that don't have shields, extremely good at denying flankers. How do you shut down this character that has mass amounts of crowd control and giant amounts of health plus a powerful ultimate? First thing is generally track his hook. You need to try to be listening as much as possible for the hook activation sound. I know there's a lot of noise that's going on, but his hook is incredibly important. Once he doesn't have his hook, you're not as afraid of getting mid-fight hooked, and you can play more aggressively. So tanks specifically, you need to be aware of what Bucky is doing and when he has hook and when he doesn't have hook. In addition to that, he's gonna have more HP than you think. All of his abilities give him shield, either 40 or 50s, and that should help you decide how you push him, how you fight him. But Bucky's core weakness is to fight outside his range. He's pretty weak to poke. Heroes that want to fight at distance, characters like Hela, Namor, Hawkeye is extremely good, Squirrel Girl, even Moon Knight. Characters that want to fight further than mid-range are going to be good against him. Even some flyers are going to be hard for him to interact with if they're playing too far away because of the long travel time with his projectile fire. For his ultimate, I want you to peel incredibly hard. Denying that first kill from him is the single most important thing for everyone on the battlefield. The second he pops that ultimate, you need to be hard pocketing the person he's going for. You have to shut it down. You might be like, oh, it's not my problem, I'm gonna go dip out, do something else, I'm gonna run away. But if he kills that first person, he's gonna kill everybody. It's an all hands on deck situation where if you all join together or you help the person that he's going on and shut it down, he's not gonna get a lot of value. In fact, he could just die and feed. It's easier to shut it down than you think, but a lot of people just scatter and run away, and that's exactly what Bucky wants you to do. He doesn't want you to help the person that he's on. He doesn't want you to heal them or pocket them. He doesn't want you to focus him while he's trying to confirm that first kill or get in the way of him trying to kill that first person. And then for tanks that are good against him, specifically shield tanks are great. Magneto and Doctor Strange are going to be really, really good at denying him. Just make sure that you're careful around his hook on Doctor Strange because he's trying to set up a cancel on your ultimate. And then the Thing is going to be good as well because you can't crowd control him. Now, there are 2 more DPS that you need to shut down. Next up is Ironfist, and Ironfist is much stronger against tanks now because his damage scales based on their max HP instead of flat amount of damage, so he does less damage to squishies, which means as a squishy, you're gonna have an easier time dueling him. So if you're a DPS, forcing the Ironfist to fight you or mark you is actually good for your team. You don't want them on your tanks, you would rather fight them yourself. Now, of course, peeling for anybody is really important against Ironfist. The thing about Ironfist is he has an uptime problem. His big weakness comes from the fact that he's out of the fight for too long and he's not doing anything when he's out of the fight. So when he's in, it's once again an all hands on deck situation, or you are trying to help whoever the Ironfist is on, force the Ironfist off, and then you can go back to doing other stuff. But it's really just about messing up that cycle. One of the things that's also important is now he's gonna heal for higher health, but it's gonna fade away. So he's gonna heal, he's gonna engage right away, but he's not gonna be able to keep engaging for a crazy long time. Once you outlast that initial engagement, he's gonna have to cycle away, which is gonna be good overall. Also, in general, just being calm under pressure, especially as a squishy. Recognize that his block is 180 degrees, so you need to be patient. You don't want to take a little damage and instantly pop your ability. You're playing into what an Ironfist wants you to do. The last up is Wolverine, a character that, of course, is going to get banned a lot, but let's talk about how you can shut him down without even banning him. Of course, there's characters that are good against him. Any mass crowd control, something like Namor with the synergy, or Bucky, or even Invisible Woman is very, very good against him. What else about Wolverine can you do to shut him down? Let's say from the tank position. Well, Wolverine has a very specific cycle where he's going to drop down or go around a corner, use his alternate fire to get in a little close, and then he's going to try to grip you into his team. He's going to do that every single time. That's on a rather long cooldown. And what you have to do is you have to scout and find where he's at and play opposite to him. So if you're a tank, you do not want to be playing right next to the wall underneath where he's going to fall down on you. You do not want to be playing next to a corner that he could wrap around and quickly grab you. I think a lot of tanks will have like a Bucky or something on their team, and then they're constantly getting gripped, and they're like, why aren't you stopping this Wolverine? Well, you need to give the people on your team more time to interact with the Wolverine. You need to be in a position where the Wolverine has to walk further to get to you, so there's more time for your team to interact with them and more time for you to interact with the Wolverine as well. Once again, Wolverine suffers from an uptime problem. He's not doing a lot when he's not actually successfully hitting his cycle. So if you can make that cycle really hard, eventually he's just going to be ineffective. Now, as a DPS, you also would like to force a Wolverine to focus you. Scouting him out and forcing that fight is good because, once again, Wolverine's a melee character, so characters that can fight him from a relatively safe distance but constantly apply pressure, like Psylocke and Star-Lord, are actually fairly good if you're marking the Wolverine. And then anyone should be calling when Wolverine's passive is triggered, because it's a very important call to make. Someone shouldn't all in the Wolverine. If it's only going to trigger his passive, it could get them killed. So everyone knowing when he has it or when he doesn't, very important to shut him down. And next up, let's talk about the best composition structures that you can build in this new patch. After a lot of the nerfs to the triple support, what is the best meta that you can run? Objectively is 2-2-2. Playing 2 tanks, 2 DPS, and 2 supports is just the right amount of healing, the right amount of offense and defense. You're going to be able to apply pressure and bait out ultimates in the mid fight. You're going to have a good amount of mitigation, a good amount of presence. You're going to have enough bodies so that your supports can get their ultimates fast enough. And it's just a really healthy, balanced composition that has a good amount of HP, good amount of resources. It's going to win the most, in my opinion. I think it's the best one. It's the one we see the most in pro compositions. It's the one that we see most in ranked. And even last season, when triple support was meta, quote unquote, 2-2-2 was performing better. And now I think 2-2-2 is even better than that. Now, of course, when you're playing 2-2-2, there are some support compositions that just wouldn't work. You can't play Adam, Warlock, Loki, especially if you have like a Groot. You're not going to have enough heals. So having the right combination of characters is important, and having a good mixture of combos or synergies in that composition is something that I would highly recommend. In general, I think this is the best composition in the dark. Now, there are some alternatives. Let's first talk about 1-3-2, 1 tank, 3 DPS, and 2 supports. I actually think that this can be great, especially if you have 3 DPS players that don't play tank. 2-2-2 can be good on paper, but if you have like a really good DPS player and you're throwing them on a tank that they just don't know how to play, it's actually worse than just playing 1-3-2. Now, there are some tanks that are better at this. Strange, Magneto are great solo tanks. I think Groot can actually be fairly good if you ban Wolverine specifically, but you can't play every tank as a solo tank. Thor is pretty bad. Penny is pretty bad. Some tanks are going to be better than others, but it's also important that you have the right support combination when you're playing 1-3-2, mainly because you're not going to have as much bodies to heal up. So if you're playing 2 supports that want to heal a ton, let's say you're playing Cloak and Luna, you don't really have enough healing or enough bodies to heal to generate support ults all that quickly. Like if you play 1-3-2 with the Luna and Cloak and they're playing 2-2-2 and they're playing like Adam and Luna, that Luna or that Cloak will beat y'all to ultimate by like 30-40%. That's why if you're playing 1-3-2, because you have more DPS, you would rather play some more offensive characters. I think characters like Rocket, characters like Mantis, Warlock is very good, and just in general, more offensive characters, or at least one offensive character with a mass heal support, someone that's bringing more value besides just healing value, because there's just less heals to go around or less bodies to heal. Now, I think that this really thrives, especially when you're synergy based. I think that's where 1-3-2 really does well. If you're playing the Mantis, Warlock, Star-Lord synergy, or maybe you're playing Black Panther plus Magic and maybe a Psylocke or something like that, finding synergies to get extra value is good in this composition, and there's some synergies that work really well, so I'd recommend it. Now, last up, let's talk about triple support. I know I said that triple support is weaker here, but you got to make it a specific way. You need offensive capabilities to create plays, apply pressure, bait out ultimates in the neutral game before ultimates are being invested. You know, you want to be able to force a support ult, or you want to be able to kill or pressure a tank so they can't set up the perfect ultimate for their team. You don't want to overload a triple support composition because you're lacking in pressure when you remove a DPS. You're lacking in pressure hard when you remove a tank. So you want to fill that with a support that can apply extra pressure. You need to play something like that to make it work. And number 3 on the list, let's talk about the flyer responsibility. There are a lot of flyers right now, and how do you deal with them if you're not someone that can directly deal with them, right? You're a tank and you're like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Primarily, hit scan DPS are the characters that are going to shut down flyers the best, and you might think Punisher Hela, but really the best is actually like Star-Lord, Psylocke, because they can attack from behind them to the side of them. It's easier for them to do it because they can play any position, but I would say Hela is also very good, and Punisher can be really good, especially with the Rocket synergy. Now, there also are projectile characters that can shut down a flyer, namely Namor is actually really good against the flyer. The turrets are going to shoot it. The hitboxes on your projectiles are really easy to hit, and other flyers as well. So, you know, you could play a storm to counter a storm, things like that. So first off, as a tank, you want to create space for your DPS to get an angle. This means that you're not always just playing on the front line. line. Let's say you're playing 2 tanks. Yes, you can apply pressure on the front line, but your DPS need to get an off-angle line of sight on the flyer. Make sure that high ground is flushed. You need to go with your DPS ideally and generate pressure for them on that side, because every DPS player will tell you this. They're trying to get a line of sight to that flyer that everyone's complaining about, and the enemy mag is pushing into them. The enemy strange is pushing into them, and they have to back away. They can't take that angle. They can't kill the flyer because the flyer is like playing around a piece of cover and only engaging specifically. The DPS is in a situation where they're like, hey, I know I need to shut down that flyer, but every time I try to shut down that flyer, I'm being pressured by the enemy tanks. And so you need to try to alleviate that pressure for them as much as you can and create more space for them to engage on the flyer. You can't do something directly, but by indirectly not helping them, you're gonna create a situation where the flyers never countered. On top of that, if you can apply a lot of pressure yourself, you can make it so the flyers get less pressure. Just because you're a dive tank, you might not be able to create that off angle for your DPS, but you can apply a lot of pressure into the enemy backline, freeing up space so that your DPS can push up and take that off angle to get a line of sight on the flyer, and the flyer's not going to get like constant invisible woman pocket or whatever the case may be. And then I did talk about giving DPS a vantage point. Clearing out high ground or giving them a route to the high ground is great. Like a Groot giving a ramp to a high ground for a DPS, freaking amazing. So it's all about creating more opportunity for your team to do what they have to do or they're supposed to do. Make that as easy for them as possible is kind of the game here. Now for supports, shoot them if you can. There's a lot of supports that directly hit flyers. Invisible Woman can ground them with her orb. Adam Warlock might be one of the best anti-flyer characters in the game. And then Mantis also can damage boost the DPS, but also heal your teammates that are actively trying to duel or fight a flyer. Oftentimes, a DPS has to get into a riskier position to get good line of sight on the flyer. If you want your DPS to require no resources from you, you need to help enable that play. And maybe that means pocketing that person for a little while for them to play in this position. But if they go to this off angle, take a little damage, don't get healed, and have to come back to your team over and over again, you're just prolonging the cycle where they're not able to deal with the problem. You gotta at least give them the chance, right? Don't assume they can't deal with it before you at least try to enable them to do it. Let's move on to number 4. This is a big complaint that I get from a lot of people talking about why are all games stomps or rolls? And I would say that this happens far, far more in low elo than high elo. Higher elo players learn how to adapt to the situation and they make adjustments. A lot more adjustments than low elo players do. Low elo players will lose to something and they won't make any adjustments to their game style or what they're playing, and it's gonna make it so that nothing changes and they're just gonna get stopped. If you are getting farmed, if you are losing over and over again, dying over and over again, you need to understand why. Being completely ineffective is just not okay, and it doesn't really matter if it's someone else's fault. You could say, I played correct here, I played well, I didn't miss a shot, but I still died because this person didn't give me heals, or this person didn't shield for me. These can all be valid reasons, and it might be true, but it's not gonna stop the snowball. It's not gonna stop you from losing. And as much as I know high-ranked players have ego, everyone has an ego, right? But you gotta drop the ego sometimes and figure out what you can do, whether you're changing your play or changing your pick. Swapping off your pick does not mean you're playing bad. You should think, even though I think I'm playing proper, this is not working, I'm gonna find a way to get value. Because you could be like, I'm gonna keep playing my character and we're gonna get snowballed and you're gonna lose, right? And you could walk away from that game 10-5 and you're like, wow, I'm SVP, I carried, I did everything I could. And you might have played well and your teammates might have played bad, but that doesn't mean you couldn't have changed the outcome. Play with the teammates you have, not the teammates you want. This is super, super important to embrace, because otherwise you're gonna have these moments where you're just getting rolled when really you could have changed the outcome. And number 5, I want to speak about one-tricking. Now, I do think that it's important to have characters that you're very powerful with, you're very good with, you have a lot of impact with. I always say threat or an answer. You could be a threat, and oftentimes you will be that threat when you're locking certain characters. So like, let's say you're locking Black Panther, you could be a threat and it doesn't really matter what the enemy team is playing. If they don't have an answer to you, you could just run through the enemy team. You don't need to counter the flyer when you're killing their supports every single fight. You're a threat. But enemies will swap to counter you. They're going to make it really hard on you to be that threat. They're going to be able to deal with you a lot easier than it's going to be for you to overcome that and get value. Now, there is certain value in forcing enemies to be an answer and not a threat. Like, let's say you're a great Black Panther and they're a good Iron Fist, but you keep dominating them so hard that you force the good Iron Fist off into Namor. That is good to be a better threat. It is valuable. Now, it is important to understand that even if you're playing extremely well, you need to be flexible to answers that the enemy will whip out. You can't always have mirrored conditions. Let's say you're on a dive. If the enemy is playing hard anti-dive and your team is not on any dive characters, you might not be able to make it work. Maybe if your team was on Cap and Venom and going in with you and baiting out some of their cooldowns with you, but on your own, it's going to be harder, and it's important to understand how impactful you are and not being too stubborn where you're unwilling to swap up what you're playing depending on what is shutting you down, because it's really an unfair situation. While you're performing extremely well, when you have an advantage or even a small counter, forcing yourself to try to keep playing the same character when people are all hard countering you is making your job very, very difficult. And I would really discourage people to take it as an ego battle to get value only on your hero. And if your objective is to win, you should think about it as more of a strategic game rather than just one where you're locking a hero and forcing it to work. Even pros will swap in the right situation, even if they're insane at a certain character. Now, that being said, I don't encourage you to become overly flexible though. You still need to have characters that you can carry really hard on, even through some amount of counters. Like if you're swapping off of your dive character every time they have one counter, then you probably need to learn how to overcome at least that and become better, because you're not learning each character deeply enough. 5 to 6 characters with like 3 in your main role and then 1 to 2 in the other roles is fine. Any more than that and you're probably learning too many characters and you're not getting good enough at them. Now, as far as building that flexible hero pool, I would say it's good to have a flexible enough pool not to be forced into awkward heroes that don't work. Like if you want to expand to a tank in your hero pool and you learn only Thor, and when you're forced to solo tank, you're just not very effective because you're solo Thor, your hero pool is holding you back from filling and being effective. Like you're filling anyways, but now you're not going to be that effective. Having another tank in your hero pool like Magneto that is better at solo tanking rounds out your hero pool and doesn't force you into awkward hero situations that don't work. That's one of the reasons why, even though I play Adam and Mantis in my support rotation, I think I should probably add in Invisible Woman to my hero pool for supports, or maybe sub out Mantis with Invisible Woman or something along those lines. Because my main role is definitely DPS, and my alternate roles I'm trying to optimize so that I don't have to learn a bazillion characters, but I can still be effective in the times where I have to fill and not create awkward moments for my team based on the compositions we can't or can play. Now, number 6 on the list is about ultimates. The most important thing that you can play around or game plan around is ultimates in Marvel Rivals. And the first thing that you can do that's very impactful is to force enemy supports early. Have you ever pushed up, applied pressure to a support, they're about to die and they popped ultimate? This is good. Anytime you can force an enemy to support ult in a situation where they otherwise would have waited is value gain. This is super, super important because it paves the way for many other ultimates down the line or other plays down the line. And it's something that you should really actively be searching to do at all times in a way that you're not dying. So even if you ult back into it afterwards or defensive ult afterwards, being the one that ults secondary is value than being the one that ults first. Now, as a support, you should think about this on the flip side. Like if you're a Luna, recognize that you have your ultimate and there are certain ultimates that you want to shut down. If you are positioned too aggressively to the point where you get your ultimate forced early because you're out of position and you'll die otherwise, then you're paving the way for your opponents to make a play. So it's two sides of the same coin, but it's an important dynamic that you should understand if you want to climb in Rivals. Now, I'd also say something that's really powerful is to take initiative and ult first, specifically with DPS or offensive ultimates. I'm not talking about ulting first with Cloak and Dagger ultimate or something like that. I'm talking about taking the initiative when enemies are on the back foot, especially if you get an ultimate really early. If you're playing Bucky and you get the rocket synergy and you're shooting into the enemy tanks a lot, you get an ultimate really fast, popping your ultimate right away, putting your opponents on the back foot where they have to either respond perfectly or fall over is great. You basically put the burden on the opponents. You can play super slow, let everyone build their ultimates and try to trade ultimates perfectly, but I would say taking the initiative is a great way to catch people off guard. Maybe people haven't built up their ultimates yet, and even more important than that, you can win a fight before the enemies get to set up the optimal game plan, and maybe before they wanted to set up the optimal game plan. It's really strong if you have the tempo initiative and enemies are on a slight back foot. You can turn that into a snowball where with one ultimate you kind of topple them over before they even expect ultimates to happen. Now, another thing that's really important right now than ever before, I mean, it's been important for a while, but communicate. Please communicate. If you double support ultimate, you just lose the game. At the very least, type and say, I'll ult for this ult, or you ult first, something like that. Don't ult unless they ult 100%. It's very important that you stick by what you say and then you follow through. Even if it ends up in y'all getting wiped, at least you listen to the call. But what do you do in the situations where they have an ultimate and you don't have like a direct shutdown to it? How do you deal with that? Well, the first thing that you could do is play slow, playing in a way that is like passively positioned, not too offensive, not too up, so that strangers can't come in and ult y'all or people can't come in and make a play on y'all. And you're playing to build up ultimates. So you're just applying a little pressure, trading some resources, trying to build up ultimates before you walk forward enough to where they're going to start investing ultimates. The other thing that you could do is take a higher risk play. So like, let's say you're holding an objective, you used all your ultimates and you know the enemy have like 4 ultimates. Well, as Bucky, you could just sit there and just play the back line like you normally do, or you could go on a really aggressive angle flank, trying to potentially pick off somebody, mess with the fight, trade out, create some value. That means that you maybe could win this fight that on paper you shouldn't win, because you're doing something that is unexpected, has a really high ceiling, but recognize that the floor is y'all getting ulted anyway. So you're trying to make a play that can overcome that ultimate advantage, and sometimes that means a higher risk play. But there's also some other things that you can do, like saving an ability, for example. There's ways you can positionally do things differently, and then general other game plans to shut down ultimates, even when you don't have a direct, simple answer like a Luna Snow ult. And number 7 on the list is to be less needy. It's not about your impact when you have tons of resources, tons of space, tons of healing, tons of pocket. It's about what you can accomplish when you have low resources, or when people on your team are not providing you everything that you could want. You got to keep in mind that attention and focus is a zero-sum game. Like, if you're forcing your supports to constantly heal you, that means they're not healing someone else, so that means they're not making a play or providing pressure or providing value. Just healing you is not the easiest route to a victory. Understand that your job is to do as much as you possibly can while demanding the least from your team. This means positionally playing close to cover, so you don't require someone to bail you out or constantly pocket you just to exist in the open. This means playing good effective ranges, so you're constantly forcing the opponents to provide their DPS or their players more resources than you, because you're playing in a better effective range relative to your character. You're trading damage at a more favorable rate. This also means you playing high ground without your supports having additional pressure to bail you out of situations instantly, or else you just die. And also playing your health packs, understanding the health pack locations and how to get to them. It's all things that don't force your teammates to hard pocket you to survive, and don't demand an instant response to you under pressure. If you're under a little bit of pressure and instantly demand, I need healing in the next 2 seconds or I die, you're putting a lot of pressure on your team and you're asking a lot from them. You want to be less needy. You want to give your team more time to help you, and you want to require less from them to still function as a team. I think this becomes a lot easier to do when you play every single role. You'll find people that don't understand this concept if they've only ever played like DPS, and they think about things in a very me point of view. But you gotta respect what your teammates are trying to do, and their time and their attention and their focus. What can they do if they don't have to babysit you 24/7? The number 8 on the list is about mechanical skill and the fact that it matters. One of the best ways to win a team fight or create an advantage for your team in the pre-fight or the neutral game is with your mechanical skill. One of the things that a lot of people ask me, to people that have no hero shooter experience, they come from Call of Duty, but they come to Rivals and they do really well. They're in Grandmaster, they maybe are in Celestial. Why? It's because mechanical skill allows them to create these plays that are impactful that other people just can't do. Let's say you're Luna and there's a Black Panther constantly diving your team over and over again. A Luna that hits the freeze on that person and the Luna that constantly misses is night and day. Hitting it means the Black Panther is zoned away or killed. Missing it means that someone else has to do something to help you. That's one thing that you can do that mechanically, you know, can win you fights. Let's say you're a Hela and you can hit more criticals than another person. The better your mechanics are, and this is from every single role, every single character, the more opportunity and the more points in time that you can carry or having a meaningful point of impact. I want to make a mechanical guide that goes into detail, but let me give you the TLDR right now. Go into the training room, go underneath into the bot room, do Spider-Man or Luna Snow, make them move really fast and sporadic. This is a great place to practice your mechanics. Also, the free-for-all mode I think is actually rather good, as long as your focus is to be mechanically accurate and not necessarily win. It's about you mechanically playing well. And the number one tip I'll give you is to not engage in lazy aim. So if you're playing a character like Bucky or Hela, your goal is to hit criticals. Your goal is to hit headshots. Your goal is to be reliable and consistent. Your goal is not to just get damage out. And a lot of people that have bad mechanics are just generally kind of putting their crosshair in the general direction, and they're just kind of throwing damage out. They're playing Punisher and they're tracking a target, but the second that target leaves their crosshair, they're still spraying. Have control over your aim. Have control over your fire. Focus really hard on hitting criticals. Even if that makes you worse in the moment, the only way to acquire good aim is through constant pressure and forcing yourself to try to engage in proper aim and difficult aim. Mechanics are something you should focus on every single day, and something you're always trying to strive to get better at. And number 9, one of the things I would recommend is self-VOD review, analyzing how you're VODing, what you're doing in your game so that you can make better decisions. The 2 easiest things to look at is your deaths. If you ever died first in a fight, that's really bad, but in general, if you're not dying with a wipe to your team, it's a bad death. And you need to think about how could you have positioned, how could you have played, what abilities could you have used differently, and I don't want your conclusion to be, oh, they should have pocketed me. Think about ways that you could have individually changed your play to survive. The next thing I want you to evaluate is your ultimates. How did you use your ultimate is there ways to make your ultimates more consistent. I want you to stop necessarily going for these Hail Mary ultimates that are trying to wipe the enemy team. I want consistent ult value, and I want a clear understanding of they don't have this ability, so they can't deny my ultimate, so I'm going to use my ultimate here. Don't use your abilities just based on intuition. Think about how they could work and what can guarantee them to work. That's going to make you more consistent overall. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is not allowing your rank to define you. I think it's really easy to make it so that our rank is something that defines who we are, but at the end of the day, what you're doing is you're trying to be better than yourself from yesterday. You're fighting with your former self, and in that pursuit, in that betterment, this is good. This is growth. This is progress, but I want you to make sure that you're not beating yourself up, that you're not enjoying yourself, because the journey is part of the enjoyment, and I just want to make sure that you stay well and you stay healthy and mentally right. Please take care of yourself. I've been sick for like the past week and it's been miserable, so I'm gonna keep promoting health and wellness because getting sick is not fun, guys. Anyways, take care of yourself, hydrate, get some good rest. If you want extra help, I would definitely recommend checking out the Marvel Rivals Academy because we have a lot of top coaches, consistent classes, coach scrims, and so much more. So yeah, you're gonna want to check it out. Thank you so much for coming by. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.